I always err on the side of having data-driven conversations. So if a certain individual is not being flexible and they're the loudest voice in the room and they're not, flexible, they're not listening to the team, or they're dominating, whatever you want to call that, err on the side of getting data. So if you know what they're presenting is unreasonable, prove it, right? Prove it with some data. Data could be history, could be past performance. Data could also be, if this has already happened, then do you have a recurring pattern of this sort of thing? Showing them the data that, hey, clearly, boss, this has not worked in the past, and what you're suggesting is exactly the same. We've seen this movie before. What makes you think it's any different? Like, are you seeing something that I'm not seeing? Like, do you have exposure to a data point that I don't have exposure to? And if they say, yeah, what about this? Oh, great. Well, let's talk about that for a second. If they say, no, you know what, I just thought it was going to get done because of my ignorance or because of my confidence, well, now they've learned a new data point. So having data-driven conversations is always good. Tracking team performance is always good. Tracking team health metrics is always good. Tracking the rate at which you're doing your work is always good. If you have those metrics in place, then it doesn't matter what the individual's opinion is, the data is not going to lie. So err on the side of having data-driven conversations. Basically, if it gets emotional, you as an individual, detach yourself first, remove the emotion of the decision-making process, de-escalate. So detach and de-escalate, and then look at the data. And then everybody just anchor around the data. Data is the data, it's not going to lie. Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, absolutely. So you might want to contact the person who invited you to this session. It's 1 hour, so you can get a certain number of PDUs, I think, or SEUs, if you would. Yeah, absolutely. This is a very popular interview question also for Scrum Masters. So here's my tip that that I would recommend you keep in mind, not just as a Scrum Master, but as, I guess, anybody when you're going into an interview. Actually, 2 tips. First, always answer the question being asked, not the question you want to answer. The question being asked is going to be very similar to the question you want to answer, except the question you want to answer has context based on your experience that you have attached. So don't bring in information that the person in front of you has not agreed to. And don't answer the question based on that information. So basically, don't have 2 conversations, one with the person and one inside your head. Have 1 conversation. Answer the question being asked, right? I'm not even kidding. A lot of people still do that, right? Second, whenever you are asked these kinds of tactical questions, regardless of what level of the organization you're being brought into, whether you're junior, senior, middle, doesn't matter. There is always going to be a strategic impact to this question also. So your job is to answer both of those perspectives, the tactical as well as the strategy. When you are in the middle of a sprint and you get a new requirement, the tactical answer there is very easy. Anybody who's been in the industry even for a couple of months would know exactly what needs to be done. We are at the crossroads where we have to do a quick cost benefit. That means we have 10 things on our plate, new shiny object gets thrown in, quick cost benefit. Is the new object more important, more urgent than the thing we already have on our plate? And if it is, great. We'll pick up the new shiny object. We'll jeopardize the scope that we had agreed to. We'll drop something from our plate. So we'll swap things out. And as we swap, the sprint is going to fail. That means we have to go back and recalibrate expectations with all the stakeholders who had walked away from our planning with the assumption that we would do these predefined things. Now we're saying we're going to change. So you take it in with the realization that sprint is going to fail and that you should not be doing this as a practice. The strategic answer here, or the strategic thought is, how do you not end up in the same situation again? Like, why did you get hit by this iceberg? What could you have done to see this? Which means the line of sight for the future is very shallow. And that's why you keep getting blindsided by these things. So maybe you can beef up your refinement mechanism a little more, spend a little more time on doing refinement. Or maybe this was because of an incomplete understanding of an existing requirement that you have in your sprint right now, which speaks directly to your definition of ready. Maybe your definition of ready is not robust enough. And so you're not catching these things that keep coming on the left field. You want to catch them. So maybe you want to make your definition of ready more robust, right? Maybe it could also be, so there's a third thing, right? So first was refinement. So refinement, then definition ready. Here's the third possibility. The third possibility is maybe your product owner who has external facing responsibilities as well as internal facing responsibilities. External meaning facing the stakeholders, Internal meaning facing the team. Maybe your product owner is not connected to the right people outside the team for them to be able to see this information coming. Maybe they're not participating in the right forums, right? As a Scrum Master, it is your responsibility to eventually build alliances outside your team so you can see how the value from step 1 till step 10, step 1 meaning the ideation of the value, step 10 meaning when it gets to the production or release. Your job is to figure out all the different hops that the idea needs to go through from a people, process, technology, infrastructure, logistical, funding perspective, so that you have an up and about view of whenever our source of truth, which is our executive, has an idea that needs to be consumed, we're making sure our system of record, which is our backlog, and the person who is essentially taking accountability of the backlog, that person is tightly aligned with the source of truth so they can do feasibility analysis immediately. And so this thing doesn't wait for 3 months and doesn't marinate somewhere in the organization for 3 months and then hits us where it's too late, right? So there could be a bunch of things that are going on in the organization. Your job as a Scrum Master or as an organizational change agent is to build that line of sight over time. So you can see all these different moving parts of how information is coming into the team, how it's going out of the team. Obviously, you're not going to have this on day one. Something to aspire to as you grow in the company, right? This is how you get promoted. This is how you build your individual development plans also. So that's the strategy answer. The tactical answer is easy, cost benefit, right? Is it more important? Is it more urgent? Sure, we'll do it. We'll go recalibrate expectations. This is not a good thing, but we have to do it because we are where we are. The strategy answer is, okay, how do we avoid this? So tactical is firefighting, extremely important to have good muscle memory on that. Fire prevention is equally important. So invest in fire prevention. So over time, the fatigue of firefighting reduces. Otherwise, the fatigue of firefighting builds up, and that leads to an unhealthy team over time.